Yeah.
Because I want people to tell their story and not be worried about that part of it. So I'm okay with the
I'm not worried.
anonymity.
Like I told my husband, I was like, babe, this.
But he's worried about it.
He's fine. I'm like, babe.
He'll get over it.
Like, I'm like, babe, I'm sorry. Because I literally, yesterday, I posted a video on Instagram. I've, like, the last couple of days, I've posted 2 videos on Instagram, like, telling people, like, this is what you need to do. These, basically what you guys said at the hearing. And I'm like, this is what you need to do. And so many responses, like, people on sharing it. And I'm like, I have to use my voice. Like, I can't just stay quiet.
That's how I feel.
Like, I feel like I'm at the point where I'm racing against time. And I don't, like, I can't just keep my mouth shut. Like, I'm sorry if I offend you, but I have to.
It would be easier to stay silent.
Right.
And it'd be easier for me to stay silent.
Yeah.
But I feel compelled to not stay silent because I feel like other people need to know.
Right.
And other people's stories need to be told. And our stories have power. Everybody's story has value. And the collective of the stories starts to see how common this is.
Right.
And I think once we start seeing that shift, we'll see a shift in public consciousness. Like we literally will see a shift. It might take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
This is how it starts.
Right.
And that this goes to show the power of people.
Right. Totally.
We don't have to be totally run by what's going on everywhere else. We have power.
When you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome back to the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. It's great to be here, and I'm super excited about this episode. I've been looking forward to this episode ever since we decided to have it, and I knew I wanted to do this episode or something like this ever since we started doing this, and I just didn't know who the guest would be and what the circumstance would be, but I'm super excited for this episode.
This is probably a beginning of series of episodes because we're going to continue having people, like we mentioned earlier on, we want to hear from parents and we want to hear stories, and we have other people and professionals on here as well, and we'd like to bring people to you guys. So this is going to be a good way to connect with other parents who have been affected by this, and we have a special guest today as a result.
Yeah, so as you can welcome in Christina.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited, and I'm just thrilled what you guys are doing. So thank you for allowing us to use our voice.
Yeah. What do you think about the studio? Is
Love
it smaller than you
No.
thought,
I actually was expecting something different. I love it. Seriously. It's you got like
you're expecting somebody's home like just a computer and like a desk.
Yeah.
And like
But no, I like the velvet walls. Like who decided to do that? That's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, the original user of this was a musician and a composer, and he would produce all kinds of stuff. So he had to really build it nice. So
nice.
But yeah, I was how this episode came about. I was basically I met you and heard your story a while ago, and then I've been thinking about you, but then I can never remember people's names, and so like there's no way to like look up your story and then figure out who you were. And then I was in the grocery store a few weeks ago, and I passed by you guys and your 2 kids, and I totally knew I knew you. Right? I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to know this person. I recognize you, and you said hi, and
you thought they wanted another person wanting an autograph. And you're just trying to get your produce, right?
I was reaching for my pen.
Right?
A selfie again. Okay.
I know I'm famous. No, but it was funny because I actually told you. I said, Dr. Bob, do you remember me? And he's like, yeah, I do remember you. I'm like,
of course I do.
Yeah. And then I go, yeah, I heard you'd started a podcast. And then you're like, yeah, I did. I'm like, I'd love to. I think that's when you said, I'd love to have you on the show sometime to share your story. I'm like, I'd love to.
Yeah, because it hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is, I think of you as ocular palsy girl, is what is kind of like in my mind. That's kind of how it hits me, and I'm like, oh, that's you guys. And then I'm like, wait, is it you? And then I wasn't sure if it was you.
Wait,
so
then did you want a selfie with her after that? Then you wanted her autograph. I see.
So then I looked you up in my database, and I'm like, and I sent you a message. I'm like, are you the one I ran into in the grocery store?
And what's funny is that when you told me that, I messaged my husband immediately, and I said, honey, I just saw Dr. Bob Sears, and he says, he'd love for us to go on the show. And his immediate response was, that's kind of scary. Let's think about this. We don't want them to come after us, and big pharma, and I was like, okay. And he put that a little bit of fear in me, and then I was like, okay, so that's the reason why I hadn't responded.
Okay,
that's the reason. Yeah, because I'm like, okay, I want to respect my husband's wishes, but then like after this new SB 276, and then I was like, you know what? no, like I have to speak out. And then you emailed me and I was like,
Right.
It's a sign.
it's a sign. Like we got to go live with this.
Yeah. And then I guess just for full disclosure, you gave me permission to talk about your child and your medical case and your medical care.
Absolutely.
And so that would normally be confidential information.
Right.
But you've gave me permission to basically say that I've, saw your child and, was involved in your kid's medical care and that this is a very important story to share.
Right.
So,
well, I just want to thank my moms that are out there that were very open. I mean, thank God for the Facebook community and even on Instagram, vaccine, and all the moms that have reached out. I mean, when I shared my story a year ago when she got injured, I mean, for me, it was like, thank you for your outpour and reaching out to me, because then we'll go into the details, but then they started telling me like, detox, did you go report it to VAERS and go, contact a vaccine injury attorney. I'm like, what is all this?
Yeah.
But thank God for them telling
it's like
me this
hidden world that most people wouldn't even know about. And most people, unfortunately, go past that 3-year period and they haven't reported. They don't know there is a reporting database.
Right.
Nobody supported them in this process because a lot of times your doctor is not even acknowledging that this is real or this is happening and they're not reporting it.
Right.
And so this falls on the parent to have all this knowledge that we're not given from anybody else. And so if it weren't for that community of other parents who have been there and done it and led the way in this, which is why it's so important for us to be connected and to have this community.
Yes.
Because this is a very isolating experience to go through by yourself.
It
you feel
was.
very crazy.
I mean,
you feel all sorts of things.
Absolutely. And you know what? When it happened, I mean, within a week, like I think when it happened, like within a week, I started posting on Facebook and Instagram, and that's when I got the outpour. So I was able to detox within like a week after her vaccine injury. So had I waited any longer or not because of shame, like my child is cross-eyed now, and I would have been fearful. Like, what do people like? Like you don't want anybody to see your child cross-eyed. Like I remember going to the grocery store right after it happened. Like I had a patch over her eye at Costco, and people were coming up to me like, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," and I'm like, you don't, like, I wanted to tell him, like, you don't, I get you're sorry, but you don't, like, I wanted to speak out and tell them why. Or
so let's talk about the story so we can kind of give everybody an update on this.
Yeah, I'll kind of set the stage a little bit. Basically you gave your child kind of like the first 3 rounds of vaccines during infancy, but you kind of spaced some of them out. You kind of staggered them a little bit. You didn't give all of them together like usual. You somehow already knew you wanted to stagger them and spread them out a little bit. Yeah,
and I want to just give a little background history on my children because I have a 10-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And even when, as a young 25-year-old mom, when I was with my baby, I just knew always, too many vaccines at once doesn't sound good. So I always said just one vaccine at a time. We'll spread them out. So I always knew just one vaccine at a time. And sometimes her pediatricians would be like, let's do 2 or 3. And I'm like, nope, let's just do one vaccine at a time. So I always did that. And so, when she went in for her MMR vaccine on,
I just want, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
No,
so when I went in February 7th, 2018, I went in and I told her doctor, I said,
at 12 months?
At 12 months, right when she was 12 months. Her birthday was January 24th. And I said, okay, we're, right at 12 months, we have to go in for her doctor's appointment. So we waited a week and it was like February 7th. Mind you, I want to give a side note here that a month back in January 4th around, she had a double ear infection. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, but when I went in to the doctors, they gave her amoxicillin and they said, okay, just give her this. She'll be good. Within 2 days, she was like back to normal. She healed very quickly. When we went in there February 7th, I told her doctor, I said, can you just check her double ears? I mean, she's been fine. She looks great.
But she just recently had this.
She just recently had it. Want to make sure she's okay to get this vaccine. And she looked at her. She's like, nope, she looks great. Developmentally, she looks fine. She's doing great.
So how many doses has she had at that point? Do you know, like before that 12 months?
She had almost everything just staggered out.
Yes.
Yeah, she had skipped a few, but in general, you did almost everything up to that point.
So were you going every 2 to 3 weeks instead of every month?
No,
one at a
more
time?
spread out.
Yeah,
than
like
that,
more like 2-3 months. Yeah.
But you said you were only doing one at a time, but one might have been a combo.
Not always. You sometimes did more than one.
Did I?
Yeah.
The one that I always did one vaccine. I remember there's the
It was
one
a combination
of the mouth. What's
The rotavirus.
Yeah.
Yes. So that I did do the rotavirus at the same
With
time.
one injection, like one
Exactly.
injection, and
Right, okay, yeah,
and a
yes.
rotavirus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then an injection might have had 3 doses, so you're actually getting 3 at a time that one time,
Right.
plus the rotavirus, so that would have been 4 doses at that one time.
Maybe. Yeah,
If you combined it, yeah.
it was spread out. But,
Yeah.
Which we did the same thing. I mean, that's what we did. The same thing is we only did 2 things at a time is what we had done, and I didn't know there was such thing as combo like vaccines at that time, so I didn't understand that one injection was really meaning 3 doses.
Right, like the measles, mumps, and rubella. You
Yeah. In
didn't
our
know.
case, it was DTaP. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The
See,
DTaP.
yeah. And so I told the doctor, I said, okay, well, I don't really know which vaccine is she behind on. And so I'm pretty much expecting for her expertise and for her to give me that knowledge, right? And she's like, well, she hasn't had this. We can do the MMR vaccine. I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and do that one then. And there we go. We just, pinned her down and gave her the vaccine. And the next 2 days, she just kind of, your baby. Like when they have their stools. Like, if it's bad, like, oh, she's coming down with something, And right away when I saw her stool, I'm like, she looks like she's probably getting the cold or something's going on because I know this is not her normal stool. And really fussy, whiny the next couple of days. So that was Wednesday when she got the vaccine. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all like just very fussy, whiny. And it was Monday morning when she woke up and my husband and I both went into her room, opened up the door, and she's in her crib. And my husband's like, did you see her eyes? And I was like, oh my gosh, like her eyes were completely cross-eyed. And I was like, oh my gosh, babe, what is this? And like, I just go downstairs, I get my cell phone and I immediately just start typing in, cross-eyed child, what is this? And it was like strabismus, eastotropia. And I was like, well, do I need to call my doctor for this? And they said, it said there on the internet, said, no, your doctor really can't do anything about this. You would have to go to an ophthalmologist. And I said, okay. And that's when like everything I just started doing like major research, and I was like, okay, who's the best pediatric ophthalmologist here in Orange County? I found one here in Irvine. They were already closed by the time like I finally got in contact with them. They closed early that day at 12. I called them Monday morning. They're like, we can see her. Tuesday morning. They said we can see her at 1:00. I'm like, we're there. Showed up, and that's when she said, she started looking at her, and she says, you know what? Based on what you've told me so far, I'm going to request an emergency MRI. I'm like, what? And she's like, we need to look at her brain and see what's going on. And I'm like, okay. And then like there, you just start crying as a mom. Like you're like, what is going on? An emergency MRI. And I just started looking into it. Then you have to get anesthesia. I'm like, what? This is my 12-month-old baby. Like,
and she was your third or your
third.
second? So and you had not had issues. Your first 2, you had not seen these types of strong issues to where it would make you even on your radar.
No. Well, this is the thing is that when I look back at my second child's medical records, every time she would get a vaccination, she would get severely sick, like major cold, like running nose, like really. I'm like, and I would go back into the doctor's office. I'm like, she's really sick. She's running a 102 fever. She like has this horrible cough, like bad mucus.
And you didn't think about the connection then because nobody brings that to your attention.
Never.
So you move forward with your third child, again, not even thinking about anything. There's not really anything in your radar as far as you're spreading them out, but you're not really thinking that there's a chance even on that type of spread out schedule that there's any kind of risk.
Never.
Right. And that's kind of key. People tend to think that if you're doing an alternative vaccine schedule and you're spreading things out and you're doing only one shot instead of the 3 that are due that day, that it's going to be much safer.
Right.
And then we don't have good data on that. We don't know if alternative vaccine schedules are safer. Getting one vaccine can cause a severe reaction sometimes, and that was the case,
right?
In
and
your situation.
I think more importantly is that I trusted my doctor.
Sure,
right.
This is a doctor's office that we've been going to since my children, for the last 8 years. So I trusted them.
And did they tell you that your risk was a fever, or like the things to look out for after a vaccine would be fever and soreness and maybe a little fussy, like something very mild?
Yeah, very
general.
mild. She'll just probably be a with cold or not even cold. She would say she's probably getting a little fussy.
Yeah.
If she gets, irritable, if there's a fever, just give her Tylenol.
Yeah, right.
Baby Tylenol.
Right. And so, and a couple of interesting things you told me, kind of in addition to the immediate reactions, as you mentioned the diarrhea already.
Right.
And we actually do know there's very good medical research that shows the MMR vaccine can be a trigger for bowel inflammation and can cause inflammatory bowel disease and sudden diarrhea. So that's actually a known reaction.
Is that true for chickenpox too as a live virus?
I'm not sure. No, they haven't found it as true for chickenpox. And what also is interesting is your child was due also for a chickenpox vaccine and for a hepatitis A vaccine the same day. And it's interesting. Did the doctor not even offer all of those because the doctor already knew?
She already knew that I would. I would not have. They always would try, but I was like, no, we're only doing one vaccination at a time. I'm sorry.
So you had also told me, and I don't know if you were going to get to this, but in addition to the eyes suddenly going crossed, you told me that she had a significant language regression.
She did.
So this is after the initial response.
Well, so I guess just to make it brief, you got the MRI, everything was fine.
Right.
The eye doctor said, what did the eye doctor say? The MRI is fine, and you're going to do eye patching.
You're gonna we're gonna wait out, and if it doesn't get better, then maybe we'll do Botox to kind of help. Like from the eye getting worse, or we'll eventually do eye surgery. And I'm like, I am not okay with these responses. So I started doing more research.
Right. And that first eye doctor didn't say anything about this being a vaccine reaction.
No, she did not.
Right? And had you been in contact with your pediatrician's office yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So
Okay.
that was Wednesdays when we got back the results.
Right.
And my sister-in-law was the one that said, hey, did your daughter just get the MMR vaccine? And I'm on the phone with my friend. I'm like, what?
Oh, I bet that moment your heart just dropped.
I just hung up the phone. I called her. I said, yes, she did. Why? And she said, because my friend's daughter just got injured by the MMR vaccine. And that's when I went down the rabbit hole.
Wow.
That's where I just started doing all the research on it.
And can I just, I guess, say real quick is I think the reason maybe that first eye doctor wasn't maybe taking it so seriously was because eye doctors see a lot of babies with strabismus, with eyes crossed, but it's something you're born with and you have it in the first few months of life.
It wouldn't just show
eye
up
doctors
at 12
see this
months.
all the time. And so to them, it's not a big deal. You do some eye patching, and then the eyes will develop better, and the babies will outgrow it, and maybe
does
need
it resolve?
surgery. Yeah, it resolves in most cases if you're born with it, or you might need surgery. So it's a very common scenario for eye doctors to see.
But
I
wouldn't they
think,
know at 12 months?
Yeah. So
if
what
this
fascinates me is, this is a completely different thing. You have a baby with no history of eyes being crossed, the eyes being completely fine in every way. Suddenly. And they didn't just go crossed. And I'll tell you what I saw when I ended up seeing her. They didn't just go crossed. They were seriously crossed. And both of them were crossed. And that, for that eye doctor to not think of all the potential causes of this.
Was it mentioned in those appointments? Hey, she just had this appointment a couple days ago and she's been really irritable and then this happened. Like, was there any mention of that to the eye doctor? Like, hey, we had an appointment at our pediatrician just on Friday or whatever day it was, and then here we are.
Well, it wasn't until afterwards when we got the results back on Wednesday. I'm like, that's when my sister-in-law told me. That's when I was like, the
So
light
you
bulb.
weren't even thinking vaccines.
I wasn't
before
even
this,
thinking
right?
that. Yeah. And so the light bulb switched on, and I told her, I said, could this have been related to the MMR vaccine? And she says, no, that's not the case.
Who is that?
The first pediatric ophthalmologist that saw her.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
And then that day, that's when I was like, I need to go see her pediatrician right now and ask her why. And I had to pray about it before going in there because I wanted to go off on her. I was like,
it's
how
really hard.
Yeah.
I just.
But you'd also told me that not only did your child stop using the word dada, the word that she had totally went away, and it came back maybe a month later, but she lost all her babbling sounds. She was like babbling, and like 1-year-olds will babble, lost all that babbling, and then that didn't come back for 2 months. She stopped walking. She'd been walking prior to that visit.
She did.
And she totally stopped walking. And,
we have videos of her on her on her birthday, January 24th. We're like excited. The whole family's there. We're like, yeah, she's walking. And as soon as the vaccine injury, it was like she stopped walking. She was always babbling. My friends would always tell me, like, is your baby always as happy? Like, she's always so joyful. And after that, just stopped, always just whiny crying.
Yeah, personality changes.
And she didn't start walking until
Yeah,
a couple months later, I think you told me. So,
yeah.
But yeah, and so those things all seem fortunately short-lived. But yeah, but it was really the cross-eyed situation. It is an absolutely 100% well-known vaccine reaction to live virus vaccines you eventually discovered.
Right.
It's called ocular palsy. The nerve that comes out of the brainstem that basically controls how your eyes look to the side. It's your sixth cranial nerve. That nerve is specifically susceptible to injury or getting temporarily damaged when you have brain inflammation and when you have an autoimmune reaction in your brain and when you have an infection or a live virus or a vaccine that causes all kind of inflammation in the brain. It specifically is known to affect just that nerve sometimes. Mm-hmm. It seems in her it might affect a whole variety of nerves, right? But specifically, so her eyes no longer had the ability to turn outward. And they couldn't even stay straight. They would, go inward. And it was very, very shocking. But again, that is a known reaction in the medical literature that we'll come to find out. So, so then you're at your doctor's office, I guess your pediatrician.
Yeah. And so pretty much she said.
And this was before you saw the loss of language and walking, right? Like, because this is all in the first couple of days. Like, you're not really seeing all those things.
I think it was like 10 days later you saw your pediatrician.
Oh, you didn't really?
Yeah. So February 7th is when when she got injured, when she got the vaccine, and it was the following Wednesday. So that February 7th was Wednesday. The following Wednesday is when I saw the pediatrician.
So like a week, yeah.
Yeah,
because
7 days later.
Go see the ophthalmologist. They said, go do that first.
Yeah, well, I said,
you did that on your own.
I did that on my own. And then I said, do you think it could be related to the MMR vaccine? And she says, no. She was probably already cross-eyed and you never knew that before.
Yeah,
oh my God,
I knew it. That's why
it was
completely
something you just didn't
dismissed
see it.
Right?
Oh,
it's like,
God.
when she said that, I was like, are you kidding me right now? I see my child every single day. I know her cries. I know her poops. I know everything about my child. How can you possibly tell me?
For 12 months, I just didn't notice this.
Right?
Like, is she serious? I mean, all the photos you take of kids all the time, like, come on.
Yeah. And then she said, the other thing that she said that threw me off, I said, well, then why did the ophthalmologist request an emergency MRI? She says, you know what? She probably saw that you were a bit overworked.
This is your
you're
pediatrician.
frantic.
Yeah, I'm frantic.
And this is your
hysterical.
pediatrician now.
This is my pediatrician now.
Right.
And she says,
because you're a woman, you're hysterical.
Right.
Yeah.
And she said, I think an emergency MRI was a bit of an overkill. And so I think that's why she did that. And I was like, I am never coming back to this office ever again. And after that, that's when I, again, started doing research and saying, okay, let's find out. There's a neuro-ophthalmologist that can actually see it. I'm like, I just want the best in California. Who are they?
And can I just want to say real quick, I guess just some of my perspectives I was thinking about during this process and trying to picture myself in that pediatric office with you and just why would your pediatrician who had never seen this, this strabismus before, why would he or she not be concerned about this sudden, huge change? And
what did your pediatrician say it was? Right. If it wasn't the vaccine, what was it?
Well, I feel like I was looking at the notes, and she was saying just stuff like, well, it's either maybe she got sick or maybe it was from the vaccine, but regardless, it doesn't matter because there's no treatment.
Right.
And there's nothing we need to do. There's nothing we need to worry about.
It'll go away on its own.
It'll get better. Right. And I'm trying to think of, I feel like it would be hard for a doctor. I think that's their knee-jerk response. It's almost their reflex. It's automatically not related to a vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's just like anytime they hear anything that bad happens, immediately their mind says, well, it's not the vaccine, so what is it? Let's move on. Because for them to admit it's the vaccine means they have to now examine a part of their medical practice that they're just kind of uncomfortable, I think, making that connection. And they worry, they didn't warn you about that. They didn't even know it could happen.
Right.
And it shocks me that this exact side effect is listed in the MMR vaccine product insert from the FDA. This exact reaction. And
that was not something you were able to bring to her at some point.
Well, you probably didn't know yet.
I did not.
And the eye doctor didn't know, and your pediatrician doesn't know, and it kind of concerns me greatly. I mean, because vaccination is the absolute most complicated part of every pediatrician's day, but it's the part they know the least. I feel like because it's so complex, why aren't doctors trained to know every single side effect so they know when it happens?
Right.
They're trained that these side effects are impossible. They're always coincidental. And because they're always coincidental, there's actually no reason to learn all the side effects.
They say it's the parents reaching for an explanation.
Right,
We're just reaching.
right.
We just want something to pin
And
it
when
on.
it happens, we don't need to know because it's not related to the vaccine. So we have no reason to memorize all these possible side effects.
Well, and the last thing that she
crazy.
told me when I was leaving, she says, make sure you stay off the internet. Don't listen to these mom bloggers. Don't listen to what they're saying. 100% of the stuff that's out there is not true. Don't listen to all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, sure.
But isn't
Right.
it more concerning that in her note she says it might have been the vaccine, but it doesn't matter because there's no real intervention needed at this point, instead of saying it may have been the vaccine and we need to report this,
Right.
even if it does
Right.
self-correct.
Right.
Yes.
How can you just go, well, because there's no treatment, we don't need to do anything? Yeah, the thing you need to do is recognize the fact that this happened and acknowledge that this happened, and that should be part of her new wheelhouse as far as her own skill set now that this is a potential after MMR
Right.
for certain people. It's like you can't just not, because there's no treatment, that's not where you stop the conversation.
Right. Like she could have said, you know what? I'm so sorry this happened to you. This is how we can help you.
Or let me go look. I am going to go tonight and
Right.
I'm going to go look up
Yeah.
the package insert on this. I'm going to see if this is a possibility. I'll check, even if it is, and even if there's no way to correct it on its own. I'm going to make a report for you because this is an
Right.
example of when it happened,
Right.
and you
And
have
so-
a right to do
Yeah.
that.
Right. And instead, she just dismissed me. It
Yeah,
was like,
exactly.
don't stop worrying. Stop worrying. It'll be fine.
And I think doctors, they only really feel obligated to memorize the contraindications to vaccination because that's where they're legally responsible now for your child and your child's care, and they're responsible for making sure you don't get that vaccine again if it was a contraindication. That's all pediatricians feel like they need to know. They don't have to know the 500 other possible severe side effects because when they happen, it just doesn't matter. And it's a real tragedy in the pediatric medical community, and you guys were directly affected by that. So
Were you able to? Is she in, if in legal? If you move forward in legal stuff, were you able to pass that information to her about this? Here's a copy of the package insert. Here's where it says it, so that you know for your records this is exactly what happened. Because I would have
Right.
definitely done
I mean, it's
that.
probably worth maybe sending her that
Yeah,
information
I
and
would.
saying, by the way, we've moved on from your office, but here's
Yeah,
the actual
I would
medical
do that.
data that shows that this.
including any
That
court
this
case. If you're
happens.
moving forward in legal stuff, I would absolutely have a copy of all. I would, because people need to know and they need to still be educated on this.
Right.
And for you to leave her practice isn't enough of a slap in her face as it
Right.
relates to this issue as educating her and saying, hey, by the way, I'm not, like you're saying, I'm not with you anymore, but I think you need to know this for the other patients that you have. And this is just to show you. It wasn't me being hysterical.
Right.
This wasn't just me overworking myself. I know my child. This is what happened. It says clear as day that this is a potential risk. And this is something you as a medical provider should know.
Yeah, that is so key. I'm glad you said that because I think one of the problems that we see in this circumstance is almost every patient when this happens to you don't go back to that doctor again.
Right.
So they're not seeing your child's problems for months and years to go. And so she's probably no fault of hers. She's probably already forgotten all about that this even happened.
Right.
But
But
she's
she
not
shouldn't.
seeing you again, and she should.
Yeah.
And so even if you're not going to still get care there, you almost
exactly.
want to make sure you inform them of what happened in
Yeah.
a very nice way so that she can think, oh my gosh, if I ever see ocular palsy again suddenly
FedEx
in
a
a
little
1-year-old.
packet to her that shows up in her office that she has to open up
she
and
can
read
know.
through.
She can know.
Yeah. Well, I know that they did call me and they wanted to like document all of this. So they called me, one of their general managers there in the, because it's a big clinic. I mean, this is a well-known clinic here in Orange County. And so, or I should say practice. But they wanted to document everything. And I told them, I said, you know what? I did not like her lack of compassion and her empathy. She didn't say, instead, I told them exactly what she said. I mean, this is not the way a pediatrician should respond to their patients. And so after this, what happened is that's when we found a neuro-ophthalmologist here at UC Irvine at the Eye Institute. And they were like, well, we can't see you till another month and a half. I'm like, no, I need to
get
see her
in.
now. And they're like, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. I felt like I was just racing against time.
Yeah.
So when you're a worried mom, you become more better than the FBI and the CSI. Like you just do, right?
Yes,
and
yeah.
so for me, I was like,
Better than a doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so then I did the research, and I found out that she was actually a faculty member at UCI. And so I emailed her and I just said, please, I plead with you. Please, I need you to see my child. I feel like I'm racing against time. I sent her pictures. She responded within 24 hours and said, I'm out of town, but I will see her on Monday morning.
Oh,
I'm
good
like,
for you.
Thank you so much.
See, this is the example, parents. This is the whole concept of do not stay silent. Yeah. Do not stay silent. Don't just stay in the background while somebody else dictates for you how your child is going to be protected or if they're going to be protected or cared for. You have to go make it happen. Good for you for being proactive enough to say, this is not good enough.
Right.
And I'm going to leave this practice that was not treating me well. And this is not good enough that I can't get an appointment. This is serious to us. This affects our family. I'm going to find a way. And that's exactly the kind of power that mothers specifically have. And this is exactly why our voices should not be dismissed. Right. Because look at that, like ability to make it happen for your child. That's what you do. And that's the type of protection that we give. And so good for you.
Yeah. And thank you. And, and after, so when we went in there, immediately upon seeing her, she just said, you know what? After she looked at her and she did her work, she just said, what happened with is that the vaccine, the MMR vaccine, the live virus in the vaccine attacked her nervous system and gave her 6 nerve palsy. Therefore, moving forward, she cannot get any more live virus vaccines or the same thing will happen again. And it was just like, such a relief to hear
to be
that.
Validated.
Yes. And I was like, oh, and I'm just like to tears because I'm like,
oh my God, I would have that quotation listed in the chart. I would be sending that to that pediatrician also. By the way, a specialist in this is exactly what she said. Remember how you told me that it could not have been this? Well, here is your fact check because this is exactly what this neuro-ophthalmologist has told me about the relation to this live virus, and you need to be educated on it.
You're inspiring me to call them and don't say this. So thank you for sharing. But you're right because they need to know the repercussions.
People need to be accountable.
Yes.
And we often get upset and we talk about it with our friends. I can't believe that happened. And we never take action.
I agree.
And this is what we've been talking about lately is we have to go the next level. Everything that you can do for accountability, including reporting negligence in this case for something like that too.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah. We have to hold people accountable. Right. And usually I think people are afraid to, so then they're not forced to be to hear this face to face and have to deal with this, but that's what they need to do because this family was negatively affected and you pushed through it. And what if you would have just accepted what she said, never went and seen someone, and just would have accepted this condition for your child and would have said it's not related to the vaccine, continued to vaccinate, God forbid, and it had something very serious, neurologically even more serious than that go wrong.
Right.
And it would have all been because you weren't listening to what your own voice was telling you, which was there's something wrong here. And that fire that encouraged you to go somewhere else. And you were completely vindicated and validated because you're like, yes, I knew what I was saying was right. And a trained doctor is telling you, yes, you're right also.
Right. I wanted to throw in there, I think so many parents are in this situation and they're thinking my doctor must know what he or she is doing. My doctor must know this information.
They're the experts on vaccines.
They know what to do. My doctor knows everything, right? And that's kind of an old-fashioned way we think about
because they go to medical school for this.
Right. But I think people probably don't look at their doctors that way as much anymore, but some parents do. And sometimes doctors are not right. And I know you were planning to do another live virus vaccine in about another month. You're planning to go back in and get the chickenpox vaccine, which we know can also do this exact same thing. And what if you hadn't thought to question your doctor? I mean, this could have gone a lot worse, but even so, your pediatrician and that first eye doctor should know enough to know that this is linked to vaccines, and they should have been the first people to tell you not to get a live virus vaccine again.
Right.
And what if you hadn't gone to the neuro-ophthalmologist? What if you had left it at that?
Right.
And that it's something that I think all parents need to kind of take a lesson in.
Well, I just want to praise this neuro-ophthalmologist that spoke out because again, so many doctors do not want to speak out about this because they're afraid of losing their medical license.
Okay, but think about this. We have to praise somebody for telling the truth.
I know.
I know. Think about how sad it is that we want to give kudos to somebody for just admitting what is true.
Right.
For admitting what's on the FDA package.
It's not like she went and did led a protest against people. We're saying, I want to praise you for taking that action. She literally just admitted a fact.
Right.
And we have to sit here and feel like, good for you for doing that. Isn't that so sad? Because people are afraid of it, but this is their moral obligation.
Right. And she
this is their
put
responsibility.
She put it in writing.
She
gave
put
you
it.
a letter
I said, "Can you please put this on your UCI company letterhead so we can have this?" She says, "Absolutely." Good. I mean, she didn't even this whole time. She has never hesitated to support us, and she's just been so gentle and so sweet about this, and even to the point of let's not do eye surgery because I mean that's the last resort, and so she's been trying to put it off because she wants to see if she can naturally heal on her own. But of course, we've been doing other stuff. And even after her voice, I still went to another neuro-ophthalmologist because I was like, I want another
opinion.
Did you go to another one?
I did. But guess what? I knew I had done research on this ophthalmologist and I had seen about his involvement with, I don't know. He's very involved in, I think it's the Children's Hospital out in LA.
Okay.
And I don't know.
So I kind of knew.
I kind of knew that his stance would be. And so, and even right when he saw her, he was just kind of like, no, it can't be the MMR vaccine. Like he still also dismissed it as well.
Not? Why can't it ever be a vaccine? It can be a medication. Medications. All doctors always admit to medication side effects. They're so quick to admit, especially when the FDA has it listed. When it's a vaccine, there's just a complete blackout of any possibility of side effects.
Yeah, he completely disregarded it and just said, and I think it's just, his position at Chalk. Like he's way up there. So there was no way he was going to admit.
Yeah, some of this is politics when it comes to it, for sure. It's not that he would, say this never has happened ever at all. It's just it's his first thing to be like, no, this is not part of this. It's like, it's a type of indoctrination that you sort of see. And it's so black and white. And you're thinking like, what's nice about the fact that she was a specialist is she doesn't give vaccines in an office. And so she's not part of this same like mega empire as it relates to this. So she was probably a little more open, like it's just a fact. Some vaccines do this, like it's no big deal.
Right.
But a pediatrician might be like, nope. This opens the door to admitting there are reactions. If I agree to this, then that means other people are going to come back and say this, and that's going to all of a sudden. And so they look at it completely differently. It's not just about facts for them.
Right.
So it was kind of good that she was a specialist.
Yeah.
Because she could be a little more removed from the vaccine conversation because she doesn't affect her really.
Right.
And that allowed her to be more honest.
Right.
Which was good.
Yeah. And then I think that's when I met you guys.
Yes.
I saw you guys were, I guess, looking for a new pediatrician, and you called our office, and I just want to tell you about. I guess what made you reach out to my office? And
just because there was friends of mine that said you need to reach out to Dr. Bob Sears. He's really, in support of children and vaccine injury. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, he's in San Juan, Capistrano. I'm like, he's local. Thank you, God. And so that's why I reached out.
So I think you even called us as like a same day appointment. I think it was like just like an urgent appointment. But so I walk into this room and this, so they'll probably stay with me my the rest of my life. I walked in and there's this just, adorable little, blonde toddler girl, like just kind of, I think she was, I don't know if she was on your lap or she was, kind of trying to walk around the room, but, she's looking and her one eye is kind of like looking straight, but one eye is literally like looking as if you're cross-eyed, looking at your nose, right? And then sometimes it would be the other eye. The other eye would look straight. Sometimes they would both be crossed. But it broke my heart. I started talking to her, and she would basically, because this eye was looking in, she had to turn her head away from me so that this eye would look at me, and she would basically be looking at me like this to make that eye point so then she could see who was talking to her. And then sometimes it would be like the other eye, she would decide to look at me. She could not look straight at me.
See you.
Yeah, to see me. And I just thought, this is not just some mild reaction. This isn't just a little thing. Something is, something very serious happened. And I think, we hear about all kinds of severe vaccine reactions. All kinds of neurological vaccine reactions. I think it's not common that I see and ocular palsy. And people have heard of cerebral palsy, right? Mm-hmm. That's the palsy everyone knows about. That's where basically the entire part of your brain that affects all your muscles, and all your movement all over your body, that's impaired. So you have cerebral palsy, so all of your muscles and arms don't work. She had ocular palsy, just that one nerve controlling, that one muscle of the eye was just completely affected, and it was just so. I mean, again, it hit me, but she is just the cutest. Sorry, she's replaced Serenity as the cutest little girl.
I'm okay with that. There are so many cute ones out there.
Yeah, and so then just really stuck in my head. So I think when I saw you guys in the store, then I recently I'm like, oh my gosh, that's her. But yeah, it really stuck with me. I knew right away that something had happened, and I was glad to be able to be there to document it and create a medical record of another doctor seeing this,
right?
Which is important in the medical legal arena,
right?
To get all this documented.
And I just want to add that, so pretty much in this last year, I mean, it's just been trying to heal her naturally at home, right? With no antibiotic, like nothing over. I mean, we detoxed our entire house. Like I went into another world of, okay, we are detoxing this entire house. Yeah. We're going to remove all these toxins. And how can I heal naturally? Well, sadly, she was I would say she was between 90 to 95% recovered. Like, I mean, you guys, if you saw her, you're like, oh, she looks great. But as a parent, you still see the deviation in her eye. Her neuro-ophthalmologist said, the esotropia was now, what happened is it turned out to a deviation where the eye actually goes up now. So if she's staring at something at the television, for example,
instead of side to
side, the eye now is going upward. So it's like, how can we fix that?
So that's a different nerve and muscle now. It's an additional eye muscle.
Exactly. So what happened is that the esotropia said, oh, this is the new normal. Mm-hmm. So now my eye's going to go upward.
That's compensating.
Yeah. And so the doctor was like, how can we fix this? Let's just keep doing the eyeglasses. Let's keep eye patching her. Well, last month in March, she contracted the flu from somebody at school, and it totally regressed her.
Yeah.
She went back to being cross-eyed again, completely cross-eyed. She was down. I've never seen a flu this bad. I mean, she was down for 5 to 7 days, knocked all of us down at the house for 5 to 7 days. And I was like, what is, like you're so frustrated because you're like, she was doing so good. Is this going to happen every single time that she gets sick? Or in my head, I said, okay, please eliminate flu shots. Like your shedding is injuring my child.
So what would cause in the flu virus or influenza virus or another respiratory related virus, what would cause that nerve to come back again? Well, would it be any type of live virus contact?
Yeah, I would say it'd be any type of inflammatory process that could irritate the brain, I suppose, could then make something worse.
Just now, and eventually that sensitivity will be
That sensitivity should diminish. It should diminish, but it could be any live virus vaccine, any live virus infection, and like the flu. I mean, and we know. I mean, people might then ask you, well, why not get the flu vaccine to then kind of, it shall prevent that. We know the flu vaccine doesn't stop you from getting infected with the flu. So getting the flu vaccine wouldn't even have prevented this worsening. The flu vaccine is just going to make you feel less sick.
Right.
But it's unlikely that it would even
But it won't
have
not
impacted
trigger these types of...
but then you have to look at, it could any sort of inflammatory process, like any vaccine, also trigger this.
Right.
You weigh that against, what's the risk of getting the flu vaccine versus the risk of her catching a flu,
versus
and how do you balance that?
If you guarantee it with the vaccine, then that's
it's a hard
fair.
place to be in. But
I know. And so my husband and I were like, well, what do we do now? I mean, am I going to have to shelter her, put her in her bubble? I mean, she needs to build her immunity. And so what do we do? I mean, is this going to happen every time she gets sick? And then you start doing the research on finding out that that there's actually a flu mist, and in the flu mist, it's a live virus. It's a live virus. The flu shot it's a dead virus, but the flu mist. And I said, well, that just got introduced last year. I found out that just got introduced. Reintroduced. Yes. And who knows if a parent said, well, let's not give my child a flu shot, but let's give them the flu mist. And that's what gave Hayden that. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know. And so that's where we're right now. Again, trying to,
go back to it again. I mean, also the thing I wonder too is all of the vaccines that happened in the first year, what kind of sort of foundation did that lay for an increased sensitivity to the live virus response.
Yeah.
In other words, if she would have had nothing in that first year and would have just had an MMR, would it have triggered the same type of thing? Was the immune system basically attacked so much for so long that it basically she's in a constant state of this inflammation.
Exactly.
And that really heightened not just that response, but now the ones you're seeing from other natural infections that are coming here, that I'm thinking or hoping that over time that will that sensitivity will decrease as she's been longer detox, like her body has been. I mean, I know for my daughter, I swear it took like 3 years of nothing in her system before I really saw some behaviors improve. Wow. And, because hers was also, last one was at 12 months. And we were also scheduled for the MMR the following 2 months after that, which we stopped right before we would have had that, which I think for her would have been a tipping point. Not just because I think the MMR is the dangerous one. I just think it would have been 3 live viruses at once. Right. I saw a lot of digestive issues after her. She had a live virus chickenpox one at 12 months, and then she had the chemical smelling diapers for a long time. So you're right. You notice the things with digestion, and you can tell it's attacking the gut in a way that's maybe not, positive for them. And it literally took, the digestive issues, it took probably 4 years before that resolved itself. And that's after getting nothing in her body. And we were all really sensitive with her food and really careful with all these other things, and no other medications, and she's never been on antibiotics or any of that kind of stuff. And so even still, it almost takes that long sometimes, I think, for their bodies to regulate themselves, where I'm wondering, hoping for you that by the time, a couple years, 3, 4 years, 5 years have been out of her system, that she's able to maybe decrease that sensitivity so that if she were introduced with a natural infection, that it wouldn't trigger that kind of same type of response, ideally, because her body wouldn't be in the same sort of inflammation, the state of inflammation that it's in.
And the crazy thing is that there is a group like on Facebook called something with Vision, I think it's called Vision something, with parents that their children have been injured. And so it's been very helpful with these parents and their stories. And like there was one parent that said, my child had the same thing at 7 months, and they didn't do any. They were doing great up until 4.5 years old. He regressed, and the same thing happened again. So they're doing a study right now with genetic mutation and doing all that tests. And they said you might want to do that to see whether or not maybe your daughter's susceptible to that, and her body and all that. So that's where we're at right now.
Have you seen other parents in that Vision group that talk about vaccines being a trigger for them?
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty much a group of parents that her children have been. And again, it's been so supportive to hear.
Triggered. Essentially, this thing was triggered.
By and it's not always a live virus. Like the 7-month-old would not have been a live virus MMR vaccine. It would have been, the DTaP, polio, hepatitis B.
Right.
Series.
Meaning that this is something that can happen. I know that I've seen
any vaccine
in the 80s when they did those the exposés on the DPT vaccine. I did see several cases of children that were cross-eyed, and this is after the whole cell DPT back in the 80s when this was already known to be these kinds of things, and they were still being silenced back then. And it's nothing's changed. Here we are 40 years later, and it's still happening.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Melissa and I have talked about is of course, it's not that we can, no one, your pediatrician is not to blame that this reaction happened.
Right.
Of course. But I think, do we consider it negligence when a pediatrician and then a specialist does not recognize a known severe reaction and then doesn't know to warn you to never get this vaccine again? Because if you not gone to the neuro-ophthalmologist, you would have gotten your chickenpox vaccine again. You would have gotten the MMR again when she was 5.
Right.
And you had just gone through all
plus
that.
The additional vaccines that would have come
exactly. And so is that some sort of negligence? And what I've always wondered is, the Medical Board of California, and of course all medical boards statewide, they always want to hear from patients when a doctor has been negligent. And one thing that parents can do is, you can go to a medical board for your state. You can go to the medical board website and read about how to report cases of negligence. And of course, we know that the medical boards they're investigating a lot of doctors, regarding vaccine issues and negligence. And this is kind of like the other side of that issue.
Right.
And if anyone does have a bad reaction and it's not written down and you're not advised about, the dangers of revaccination, next time, and your doctor just wants to keep vaccinating
and encouraged to report it.
Right. And your doctor doesn't tell you to report it. If they don't treat you properly, that is negligence. And I think the medical boards, would want to hear from patients that have those kinds of severe vaccine reactions, and it's not properly, at least, not properly documented. So I think that's something that could kind of help the vaccine safety awareness movement. If, not only are people now speaking out, but you can actually, people feel so frustrated that you can't sue the vaccine company.
Or the doctor.
Or the doctor. But there is something legal you can do. You can report that doctor to the medical board when you feel like they've treated you unfairly. I mean, don't just everyone report stupid things. I mean, don't report like just we don't want frivolous reports being submitted. But when there's a real good reason to believe a doctor's been negligent in caring for you regarding vaccinations, then that's a valid.
Right.
In fact, the Medical Board of California about 4 years ago issued was quoted in a San Diego article actually saying, and this isn't the exact quote, but paraphrasing, if anybody out there knows about any doctors being negligent regarding vaccination care, we want to hear from you. And they called for it.
They were talking about
they're talking about the other side of it, of that doctors not giving vaccines, or doctors giving vaccine, talking doctors who are open to, alternative vaccine schedules, and doctors who are open to, considering vaccine risk. That's what they were talking about, but they didn't phrase it that way. They just said, we want to hear about from everybody that has a doctor that was negligent in their vaccination.
Well, good
care.
to know, because you're inspiring me to go do that. Again, I think it's like
it's an extra level.
Yeah, and I think for you want to almost like you said earlier, you just forget about it and said, okay, now I just got to go take action. But like you said, they need to be held accountable.
They do, because people will not change their course of action for future situations unless they are forced. And this is not just in this is in life. There are times when people do things that are wrong, where ask my husband, I'm a big believer in, I always stand up for myself, and I will always try to go for the principle of the matter, because I feel like on principle something is wrong. And so I can't let it rest. And that goes not just for this, it goes for lots of things. I'm the kind of person that's like, no, the principle of this is wrong. I mean, my son's name is Justice, and he was named after this battle. I was pregnant with him after 277, and the idea of what is right and what is fair and what is just sat with me so deeply that I not only did I want that to be something that he attained for the rest of his life as something he could hold on to be like, I am going to fight for what's fair and what's just.
Right.
But also it was a statement about the fact that things are not that way.
Right.
And I think a lot of times people are afraid to keep people accountable.
And I just want to also add the fact that anybody that's listening that thinks that people that don't vaccinate their kids are crazy. I was that person. Yeah. So I just want to add that I was that person. And I'm ashamed to say this, but yes, did I vote for SB 277? I did. And I'm ashamed to say that because I didn't know any better. I think for me, I always said, those people that don't vaccinate their kids are crazy hippies, and I don't want their unvaccinated children around my child.
Sorry, you need to leave right now. I'm just kidding. I'm going to escort you out this door really fast.
But I just
you didn't tell me that at the beginning. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally just
This is news to me, folks. I had no idea.
But
I apologize to our listeners.
Right? But I just want you to know, because
that was like when I found out you were a Democrat. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Anyway, sorry.
No, but I want to tell people that there's only a few of us that feel like we're standing up now, and I didn't know any better, because the language that was spoken through this SB 277 was again, you don't want that unvaccinated child around my child. Sure. And
it was fear-based.
It was fear-based. And until it happens to you and it hits home, you have no idea. And that's when you're like, this is what they were talking about. This is, and so I feel like even a lot of my friends and my family members, when I posted on social media about all the stuff that's going on right now and people's stories, I feel like they just dismiss me. They turn a blind eye and they're like, okay, Christina, sure. I'm sorry that it happened to you and I'll pray for you. And that's all they do, right?
Yeah, you hear
but
that
for me, I'm like, listen, I was that person.
Yeah.
And I know it hasn't happened to you, but have some compassion.
But it shouldn't have to happen to you for people to understand.
Right.
I mean, because like I say all the time, God forbid it has to happen to you for you to open your eyes.
Right.
Because it really sucks to be in the situation where you don't know about this until it's already gone wrong.
Absolutely.
And for some, it's gone wrong in a way that it literally will change your life forever, like in your family. And I know in mine on a lesser scale. But I mean, the thing also I think that's important is even if you do totally 100% vaccinated on schedule and you really still believe in that and that's what you do for your family, you should still be able to understand and appreciate that not every child gets out unharmed. And so because of that, you should also be able to support how important it is for medical professionals to be able to intervene and protect these kids and to be knowledgeable and to be educated on vaccine, how to look for reactions, how to diagnose them, how to report them. The doctors are not given that education. And so you don't have to be on quote unquote our side of the issue to understand the message that we're giving. The message that we're giving is that regardless of your feelings on vaccines, it really has nothing to do with that. It's just we need to protect children that are at risk and children that have already been hurt need to have risk. Their siblings that are potential at risk, they need to be protected. We also need to acknowledge that they are not harmless. And we need to acknowledge they don't always work for everyone. And we need to acknowledge, some of these truths that have been out there, we really need to start stepping up. And some people might think, well, this didn't happen to my kids, so I don't really need to follow your action steps, Christina, because why would that affect me?
Exactly.
But it's not just about the individual child it happened to. It's about the greater moral responsibility that we have as a society.
And also to add to that, it's also, I look at it from this perspective, which is, there's 65 plus vaccines right now that your child has to get. There's over 200 more in the pipeline right now. And so for me, I look at it like this should be a concern to you because if it hasn't happened to your child, well, guess what? One day your children are going to have children and they're going to have to ask the same question. So this does affect every person on this earth.
It absolutely does. And you never know when it's going to affect your child, which is that's the big hard thing. There's no real way to say, well, my kids have totally been fine up till now, so there's no issue, so I can feel completely safe. You can't really ever feel completely safe. Like there's never an age where you go, it's totally fine. There's never a time where there might not be you really just don't know.
And I think it's, why should we have to play Russian roulette with our children's lives? Why? I mean, we shouldn't have to. This is, again, these are doctors and we trust our government. We trust, we're supposed to, but it's not always in the best interest of us.
And unfortunately what's going on right now in our government, our state governments is not just California, but a number of state governments are, as we speak, trying to pass new laws that basically will determine which types of vaccine reactions warrant a medical excuse. And they're trying to decide, when you have a bad reaction to a vaccine, do you have to get more doses of the vaccine in order to go to school? And we know, and unfortunately what states are doing is they're deciding that only kids who have a reaction that's so bad that the vaccine is now contraindicated according to the Centers for Disease Control guidelines, only those kids will be excused from vaccines. All other bad reactions, you'll have to keep vaccinating in order to go to school.
And so how would this be for Christina's family?
And so, your reaction, ocular palsy, is not a contraindication.
I know.
The only contraindications are encephalopathy, which is severe, very serious, devastating brain injury, and anaphylactic reactions, anaphylactic shock. Those are the only contraindications. And so, according to the, what's trying to be passed in a variety of states right now, your child would no longer be able to attend school unless you got your child another MMR and you got your child both chicken poxes and you got your child, the rest of the vaccines. Even contrary to the opinion of a specialist who said you should no longer get an MMR and a chickenpox, that would not be good enough because this decision won't be up to doctors anymore. This decision will be put in the hands of public health departments that are reading the list of reactions on the CDC contraindication list, of which there are only those two when it comes to all vaccines. So anyone listening to this, if you are very pro-vaccine, you should be very, very alarmed that Christina's child will not be allowed in school.
Any school, public or private,
any religious school. You might not be allowed in sports. In New York, they weren't temporarily allowed out in public. Right. So will you not be allowed in Disneyland? You will not be allowed in parks because your reaction wasn't bad enough.
And in her case, only having had one MMR, not having the two, would be, if you were living in Rockland, you would be somebody that was considered, she would be unvaccinated and not be allowed.
When she was 5, when she turned 4, she would be considered not up to date on her vaccines. And so it's very sad. So I think that's part of...
Even if a doctor tells you should not be getting this this one again, or any live virus again. That's still not enough.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And states are trying to make it so doctors can't make that judgment for patients anymore. That, again, that judgment will be a public health officer. And what do public health officers do? Their only job is to reduce infectious disease. Their job isn't to decide what's best for the entire health of your child and society. All they do is they want to vaccinate everybody no matter what. And that's the mindset of who's going to be making these decisions about vaccine side effects and school attendance. So that's why, everyone has to kind of get on that ball as well. And,
I think the lesson here to follow Christina is don't stay silent.
Yeah.
Not just share your story. Right. Go after what you know to be true. Go after what you know will take care of and protect your child. Do not let someone tell you what you know to be true isn't valid just because it doesn't fit their narrative of what they want to be true. Do not be silenced by doctors. Do not be silenced by anybody who's telling you this isn't a real thing that you're witnessing with your child, because they're not the one that goes home with you having to take care of your child and how this affects everybody else. And all the special care now that you have to give to your youngest affects your other two children. It affects you and your husband.
Absolutely.
And the marriage. This, you see so many divorces after vaccine injuries because the kind of stress that adds to the family, the financial expense for seeing specialists and all these treatments and stuff. Nobody's talking about that burden.
Right.
And you get dismissed just on paper, and on top of that, they get to go home to their house that doesn't have to deal with these types of things. Absolutely. And you don't. You have to go and live it every single day. And so you're a perfect example of a parent that will not stop for anything to get the answers for your child and advocate for your child. And so, like I said before, good for you. Your daughter's lucky to have you, that you did not stay silent and it didn't get worse. It could have gotten worse.
It could have. Yeah. And I just want to thank you guys for even just educating us on these town meetings that you guys have been having, because I gained so much knowledge. But I think more than anything, you just inspired me to saying, when you said, you can't stay silent, like you need to use your voice. And I was like, she's absolutely right. And so I've been very proactive on social media and using my voice and telling people, like, stand up. Like, we need to use our voice. This is our medical freedom being taken away from us, and we can allow this to happen. And so I just want to thank you guys for everything that you're doing, because yes, when it first happens, you feel like you're the only person that's going through this. You feel like you're the only crazy person, but then you find your community, you're like, thank you.
Right. And you're shocked about how large that community is.
Right.
And I imagine you're also devastated that, why didn't anybody tell me? If this community of vaccine injury is so huge, why didn't I hear any of this until it happened to me? And that's always the case.
But I just also want to add that as well, because I think that most people do know about it. Like, because I've been so like I had a girlfriend that knew what happened to my daughter, and she calls me, a couple of months ago and says, my son just got the 6-in-1 vaccine. And I was like, what new 6-in-1 vaccine? She's like, it's a new vaccine that just came out. And I saw him, Christina, and he looked so cross-eyed. And in my head, I'm like, oh, no. Did you not? I've been talking about my daughter's injury. Like, you still went in my head. And so I feel that there are parents that are still saying, okay, let me just pray for my child that he doesn't get injured, just like Christina's daughter. But I'm going to do the vaccination anyways because they have to go to school. And for me, I just look at it like, well,
it's a consciousness thing too. I find that when you've been so ingrained into one philosophy that you believe that these things are so rare and diseases are so dangerous and whatever, that this is what we've literally been born to believe, to the point where you were like supporting a law just 4 years ago. When we have that kind of belief system, even hearing somebody's story is not going to be the thing that necessarily shifts. I mean, we're talking about a complete shift in belief system. That kind of stuff takes time. And unfortunately, it's not until often it happens to you where you have no other choice but to face that.
Right.
For other people, it's not happened to them yet. So even if they do hear your story, even if you've been talking about it, it's not necessarily going to shift their belief system that is so ingrained. That goes a little bit at a time, and you'll never know who's listening. I've had people come to me months later and say, I used to think you were crazy, and this is what happened, and I totally understand where you're coming from now. Right. You never know who's listening and who's paying attention. And again, our goal is not to change anybody's mind. I'm not trying to out there to convince anybody not to vaccinate. I want everybody to do a cost-benefit analysis for every single disease. I want them to get educated on infectious disease. I want them to get educated on vaccine injury. I want them to acknowledge that there is a population of kids that are invisible here, like we just recently talked about. And I just want the perspective to change overall about this issue. Whatever you choose to do with your family based on whatever you and your trusted practitioner decide, I support that 100%. I do not think they should ever be mandated because of all the things that we've experienced. Right. And so I am not on a, like a campaign here to convince everybody else, to move forward the way we're moving forward. I want everybody to have that choice. I just think that mandating something that is guaranteed to cause harm is unethical, and I think it's wrong. And I will continue to tell my story about the harm that was caused in our lives, just to highlight that people, hey, somebody you care about, somebody you know, this happened to us, and you care about my child, it happened to her. And I want to put a face and a name on this stuff so we're not just statistics anymore and that we can't be written off. Right. And that's what you're doing by sharing your story too. You're adding to that. And you're not trying to scare people into doing whatever. You're trying to share your truth, and your truth deserves to be heard just as much as anyone else's. Right. And I hope the people around you that have already known you, they might not say so directly to you, but I hope that it resonates with them. And at some point in the back of their mind, they're remembering your story and they're remembering what happened to your family. And hopefully will change the way that they demonize people who go for an alternative path moving forward.
Right.
Yeah, and I wanted to maybe finish with, we know you told me that you guys are in vaccine court.
Yes.
Looking at some of the information you told me about, I just found very shocking about how the vaccine court is treating you guys, and it kind of just made me realize. And you shared with me how the basically you go to vaccine court to try to prove your vaccine injury. And the vaccine court, it's like an attorney general type of office or something that basically fights against you. And it shocks me that the vaccine court has submitted something to the court that's saying they have found, these so-called medical experts have found that the sixth nerve palsy had nothing to do with the MMR vaccine, and they've asked for your case to be dismissed in vaccine court. And what really pisses me off is that this vaccine court should be there to help people and to be identifying vaccine injuries and then compensating them and then educating the public about this. That's not vaccine court at all. The vaccine court's number one mission is to get your case dismissed, not to find the truth, not to help others, not to investigate what happened, but to literally get your case to do everything they can to fight against you. And that really, that bothers me to no end. I mean, it's like, we always see these like legal TV shows or legal movies where like the district attorney is going after like some criminal and they're not trying to find the truth of the case. They're just trying to find evidence that's going to get the person convicted. They don't care about the truth. They're just trying to, put everything together so that the person is guilty and they're wrong. And then you realize in the movie, they've realized, oh, the person's innocent. They didn't do the crime, but that's okay. We're just going to try to get them convicted anyway. They don't care about the truth. And that's literally how they're treating you. And it's so tragic that that vaccine court defendants, so to speak, or I don't know if they're the plaintiffs or the defendants, but they're working for the government to defend the vaccine industry instead of looking for the truth, especially when something happens right before their eyes like this.
Well, they're afraid to. I think they're just afraid that once they acknowledge this truth, it shows proof that vaccines hurt people. And the more people they acknowledge it, no matter how true it is, then they're giving weight to the argument that there is a risk here. And they're so hell-bent on maintaining this program and maintaining the confidence in this program, the full program, that they cannot handle people losing confidence in it. So they're willing to immorally move forward in their lives and deny justice to people who deserve it and deny truth and facts and information to people who deserve it, which is
and I was like, one of the first things I told our attorney is, listen, this is not about the money. I could care less about the money. This is just about compensating for the thousands of dollars we're spending and that we have spent, for medical bills. And so he's like, no, I get that. But, for me, I just look at it like what you're saying. At the end of the day, they just want to keep also their probably $4.3 billion that they have in their trust fund. I mean, I remember my attorney said this trust fund accrues more interest than it actually pays out patients. And I was like,
the compensation fund
Correct.
that's collected
the tax
as a tax on all vaccines. And
which is what and for people that don't know, which is what pays for the settlements that they do give out. And to date, there have been over $4 billion
But
paid
I think they're worried if they add ocular palsy to the list of cases that people are getting compensated for, then there's now all of a sudden there's 500 more ocular palsy cases submitted to the court. But what's tragic is you can only go to the court if you submit your claim within 3 years. So people hearing this story, and this happened to their child 4 years ago, they're out of luck.
Right.
They can't submit to vaccination.
And not only that, I remember one of the things is, again, we contacted him within 2 weeks after it happened. Again, thanks to the Facebook community saying, you need to find a vaccine injury attorney. He said, well, we can't submit the case until another 6 months. We have to see how the child is doing, wait 6 months and see if maybe they've gotten better. Then we can submit the case. And so we had to wait those 6 months. Right. And that's where we're at.
It did improve, and then it just got worse again. Did you hear from this Attorney General even though it just got worse again, or was this before?
It was before.
It got worse. It was before it got worse. Okay.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see what happens now that she's regressed in that.
So now, question: had she been sick in that first year at all?
No, it was very uncommon. Again, I was like, she's always so good. She's a happy baby. And so,
but even like colds or any kind of potential viruses. But see, it wasn't triggered then. It wasn't like just her genetic.
Right.
Situation.
Did she have some colds and stuff in the first year?
Yeah,
did she have the flu before?
No, she did not have the flu. No.
I mean, any kind of viruses she came across, that should have triggered it if this was just a genetic thing that would have come anyway.
Right.
But it wasn't until she actually had something else that all of a sudden now.
I think it's what you said. I think it was a combination of all those vaccines that she was getting over time from even when she was in my womb, getting, the flu shot and all that stuff you want to get. I think it was like leading all that up to it. And I think just her body just finally said, I can't take this anymore.
Right. And we don't know, but
we don't know.
But we do know this absolutely is known to happen after a live virus vaccine. We know that. That's undeniable. So,
and now it's a condition, though. Yeah. This is actually like a condition that she's going to be dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not like just a temporary swelling that went away and what's the big deal. That's what most reactions are, right? That's what people say. This is not. This is an actual condition that's affected your entire lives.
Right.
Well,
and the thing is, again, you don't know if she's going to go back to normal. Yeah. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, this is a hard story to hear, but it's an important story to hear. I mean, people need to hear this.
And like I mentioned to you the other day, so sad that there are so many stories to hear.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that so sad how many stories we actually have heard and continue to hear? Yeah. But good for you. I'm proud of you.
We wish her the best and that she eventually does get a full recovery. And it's very possible.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate you guys letting me use my voice and sharing her story.
No, I got that. I've written both times down. Well, you guys, thanks for joining us. This was a important episode, and remember to give us reviews and ratings. And remember, we've now started posting resources on our podcast page, on a Immunity Education Group Facebook page, and immunityeducationgroup.org on that podcast page from our homepage. You'll see all our resources. And what I'll do, I'll post, the vaccine, package insert for MMR vaccine, all circular ocular palsy, and we'll post a link to that, so people can see for themselves that this really is listed as a side effect from that vaccine, and you can see all the other neurological side effects from that vaccine listed there, all right.
And don't forget to, if you feel value to this education that we're trying to give, there's an option to donate on immunityeducationgroup.org website. And, I'd like to get some conferences that we do quarterly where we get to come do an educational conference all about the new data, new science, new studies. And we'll literally try to bring to you the best of the best and break it down for you and help you feel more empowered. And in order to do that, it requires money. Obviously, if you feel like this is important to you, that you feel like this has been valuable to you and what we continue to offer, we would love for you to contribute to that so that we can keep offering this in person at events and then also continuing to do the podcast.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you soon.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.